What's going on, everybody? This is Chris K over at the Bet on C2C podcast over at Campus to Canton. Also a member of Burning the Red Shirt podcast here. Wanted to discuss tonight's Maction slate, so November 15, a Tuesday. And it thankfully something a little bit more straightforward. So 2 games. Really the only thing that's a little different than we've seen in the past couple of weeks here is the Vegas spread and the total, right? So we see Toledo's big favorites against Bowling Green. I don't think we can project any sort of blowout and kind of dock guys because of it, but worth noting that Bowling Green's not likely to score a whole lot, which I think will resonate through all the plays that I discuss. Not a lot of intriguing options there. And then Ohio and Ball State, pretty normal mid-50s total and basically a field goal type spread, with Ohio being the favorite. So there's only 4 quarterbacks in play, and really 2 of them don't do anything for me. I get zero tingle when you say their names. So let's talk about the ones that do. Curtis Rourke and Daquan Finn. So I'll start with my number 1 guy here. It's going to be Finn. Our projection, by my projections, just don't really love Rourke as much as everybody else, and it's just the efficiency side of things that I've talked about in the past. Finn, though, on the other hand, has some big usage, which is why he always kind of hits higher, right? So we see some big games of 49 and 30 and things like that. So his upside's there. His floor is there. I mean, look at that. Not one game below 21. And against Bowling Green with kind of I don't know, it's not the same Bryant Koback running back offense there at Toledo. So I really like Finn. I don't really know how you roster many lineups without Finn and Rourke. Finn would be my number 1. He's a little bit cheaper. He's got a couple of receiver options, maybe just one, but really his rushing upside alone is enough to, if this was like a normal slate, I would say you probably don't have to stack him. But because it is just a 2-gamer, I'm definitely stacking him here tonight. Curtis Rourke's the second option that I'm going to strongly consider, obviously, right? 5 touchdowns against Buffalo, 3 against Miami, Ohio, even with St. Wiglis not doing really anything. And this is kind of see what I'm talking about here, that 7 for 3 yards. That's why a guy like Finn is typically going to project better for me. But yeah, I mean, not a whole lot to talk about, right? A tighter game, huge part of the offense. They pass it enough. He runs it enough. And let's see, their team total is going to be somewhere around 29. Toledo's is going to be somewhere around 36, 37, something like that. So, well, maybe like 33-ish. I'm not necessarily good at math. Sorry, guys. So it's definitely in favor of Finn, but it's close enough where it's, if you're a Rourke guy, I don't have any issue with that. But again, it's super flex. You're going to roster 2. Let's pump out the other quarterbacks here real quickly. With a team spread or an implied team total of just 17, this is a sprinkle at best. I mean, he has really not performed at all. He provides no rushing usage. You take away his weeks 2, 3, 5 games, I mean, he's pretty much done nothing. So not a lot to talk about there. If you think the game goes crazy, maybe you throw in some Matt McDonald, but otherwise, I just don't see why you would ever do more than just a little bit, just because you have to almost. John Paddock is the other guy here to talk about. He's not very good. He's cheaper, but not by a lot. He's not like 5K on DraftKings or anything like that. So this doesn't intrigue me either. I mean, 13 for 35. 6 sacks, essentially, I'm guessing here. He's got some really good receivers, which is disappointing. They're getting real ornery out at Ball State, and have talked about, I've saw a couple articles, a couple of comments about how they should bench him. So I would be kind of leery to pay attention to that situation, but just not a whole lot of appeal there with Paddock. You can fit a lineup with both those stud quarterbacks and the 2 stud running backs. The top running back for me is going to be Carson STEELE. Week after week, we see this. It's just insane, the amount of usage, the touchdowns, the decent passing game usage. The thing is, right, like Paddock is so bad, he's got to be relied upon a lot. So that's great for Carson STEELE users. He's going to be 85, 90% owned. There's just, I don't see how he's not, and with good reason, right? Consistency, usage, upsides, all there. Sia Bangura is that other guy at the top here. These two really separate themselves, not surprisingly, right? In a a 2-game slate with 4 teams, you're really not going to have many more than 3-4 options, but it's really a top 2, and then it's kind of like a no man's land of sketchiness. Sia Bangura, though, that he got banged up / shared some usage against NIU. They had a bye week. Then he missed the game, and he came back with vengeance, right? 2 touchdowns, some passing game usage. I just said it. You can fit the 2 studs at both positions and get it. I don't see an issue with any injuries with him. I haven't heard anything, obviously, who does with Maction, but I'm not sure. I'm thinking as I go through this, I'm trying to think of where the variance and how you can pivot, because you're going to get a lot of potential dupes. I'm guessing it'll be in the passing game, which we'll get to here in a second. But those are the top 2 guys. Like I said, then it gets really kind of weird. The next 3 projected highest guys for me are Toledo guys. And I think the reason why there's only a top 2 is because we just don't know what they're going to do with the running backs. So let's take a quick look at last game, and I'll show you what I mean. They're kind of rotating them all a little bit this season. It was kind of a battle between, is it Penny Boone? Is it Micah Kelly that's going to take over as that top guy? We really didn't get any of that. They've kind of shared / not played / maybe been hurt. And as you can see, out of nowhere, Micah Kelly 17 carries, a couple catches for nothing. So, it's hard to project the situation. I would say it's hard not to go with the guy that had the most carries in the last game, and that would be Micah Kelly here. Super cheap. I'm not, the only rule I might put in place here is max of the 2 running backs. But even then, of the 3, right? Penny Boone, Jacquez Stewart, and Micah Kelly, I don't have any issue rolling Finn plus 2 running backs plus a receiver. I just don't want Finn plus 3 running backs plus a receiver. So just something to keep in mind there. But really, you're gambling. I don't think you can, unless we hear something about maybe Penny Boone being out or Stewart being out, I don't think you can really go heavy on one of these guys, but I think you definitely should have some. Next option here that projects for me is Stewart. A little bit more expensive, a little bit higher usage in terms of the rushing game, but what has he really done? What are we signing up for here? It seems like we're really signing up for the bonus or 4 or 5 points, right? Just kind of a no man's with when you have Finn and his ability to run and his scoring and things like that. You don't get a ton of running back love. This next guy, obviously, then would be Penny Boone. Off and on, not a ton of receiving usage, but some. If you subscribe to the every other game theory, he's a great one. That's just hard not to, it's hard to ignore that, right? Don't love the play. But it's Bowling Green. They're going to be up big. I think you have to roster 1 running back, and a lot of your tournament lineups should have at least 1 running back. Not all of them, but considering the game script, the high scoring, the fact that a couple of these guys have had good games and have seen bigger workloads, right? Like against Bowling Green, 20 for 84. That's probably 20 for 110 and a touchdown. 15 for 48. That probably turns into 15 for 75 and a touchdown. Against Bowling Green, that's kind of something that would be too surprising for me. Other running backs on the slate, Nolan McCormick. What are they really doing? He played plenty against Miami, Ohio last week. He is a walk-on guy, though, that doesn't necessarily thrill me in any sort of way. There's no big game script to help him out. If it was a blowout, I'd say maybe they lean on him a little bit more than usual with Sia Bangura, but I don't know. Maybe a little bit of him. I can't see myself having much. Then Bowling Green guys. So again, what was Bowling Green doing last week? The last couple of weeks they've been real weird with how they've handled their running backs. So if we were to look at, Western Michigan 2 weeks ago, we all thought Jason Peterson would be that heavy workload. He shares it with TYRONE Keith. Then last week you say, okay, well, they're going to share it a little bit because that's what they're going to do. Patterson gets the heavy workload. Keith doesn't even play. My guess is a random late scratch injury. So, a lot of inconsistency here. I don't think Keith's in play by any means. If we hear that he's out, then I believe Patterson is a decent play. Again, their team total is only 17 or so. They're not very good on offense. What are you signing up for, right? 4, 6, 9, 4, 9, 9, 13 points. Like that's about what you're getting. You would need a vulture of a touchdown or two, but with a 17-point implied team total, that's just rough. I would never want to bank on a running back with a negative game script. That's not very good. And at 4,400, he's not even like minimum. So some sketchiness there. I don't think really there's anybody else to talk about. Jamal Johnson from Bowling Green is, I don't know. Maybe he gets some action if Keith is injured, but I think this one game where Keith was out, he only got 6 carries. So what are we really using him for? Looking at receivers. So a couple of good options, 4 guys projected at 10 or more points, top being Ja'Shawn Jackson. It's just that level of targets. I know he upset a lot of people, myself included, last week. I think he's averaging something like 11 or 12 targets a game. So disappointing to see him get 7 and only catch 2 passes. That's that Paddock situation where he's just kind of bringing him down. Even then, this could be a fun game. Maybe we see Paddock or a backup come in and do well. Hard not to really like him. Sam Wiglusz is that number 2 receiver for me. Have to think he bounces back. I would be very surprised if he didn't. Let's see if I can pull up his targets real quick. So he saw 6 targets last week. Miles Cross saw 8, so he was second on the team. There's Miles Cross. A nice game. He looked good. Rourke connected with him well. He's been seen in the red zone a bunch, getting some of those targets there. I like him. I don't know if I'll have a ton of them, but I do like him. I mean, why would you not, considering he's seen about 6 targets a game and has 3 touchdowns on the season? It's not the sexiest of plays, but if you're not using Wiglusz, who are you using in their passing game? Rourke's throwing a ton of yardage there. So 2 guys for Ohio I would definitely consider. Toledo's top guys is going to be Jerwan Newton. So big game last week. He's been pretty consistent, double digits in 5 straight. Really just one game where he didn't. Toledo's top receiver. It's pretty straightforward. Good price, good targets. Toledo's going to score a ton. Finn is seemingly healthy and very effective right now. Why wouldn't you use him at this price? I think this is not a place where I would pivot for sure. Other guys I consider now. So my 4th rated or 4th highest projected guy, even higher than Miles Cross, is Brady Hunt, the tight end from Ball State. So he is pretty cheap, but he's seen some really nice consistent usage. Ball State really likes to use him and Tanner Koziel at tight end, which is kind of weird for a MAC school to really hammer tight ends. You don't usually see that, but the 2 of them account for a quarter of the targets. So Hunt's at 12% of team targets, Koziel at 13%. But if you look at the numbers, really it's kind of leaned towards Hunt in the last 4 games. I know one game, Koziel might have been hurt, but week 7, Brady had 9 targets to Tanner's 2. Week 10, it was 8 for Koziel, 6 for Hunt. And last week, it was 8 for Hunt and 5 for Koziel. So I really like Hunt as a cheap option. Kind of limits the upside, but how many of these guys have we talked about that, what are we getting out of them, right? If I can get all the 2 studs at quarterback or running back, and all I have to do is use a nice high floor of a Brady Hunt, I'm totally doing that. So considering him here for sure. other receivers in play. You know, Toledo's Devin MADDOX is certainly in play with their big team total. He's a kind of a big play guy. He's played well. But, you know, I don't think he's hit 100 yet. He's seemingly doing better in the more recent weeks. You know, maybe a pivot there off of Newton, you know, go Finn 2 running backs and MADDOX instead of Newton. Maybe you pivot off the running backs and just say, hey, you know, anything that's scored on the ground is going to be Finn, and I'll double stack him through the air. Those are both viable options. You know, Johannes Tyler's is priced decently aggressively for not doing anything in recent weeks. His targets have kind of seen a hit towards those tight ends, so not a lot of interest here. ODU Hilaire is an interesting option. Not a lot of times you can get 8 catches and not hit like the 10.5 point fantasy prop, but I believe that's what it was last week, and he didn't do it. So high usage guy, if you're using McDonald, I think you have to use him or Broden. And Broden did have the nice game last week. They're going to score 17, so maybe through the air. I don't know how they score, you know, to be completely honest, but I don't think it's on the ground unless it's some sort of short 1-yard carry type. So I like Broden or Hilaire as maybe like a low sprinkle. They're both pretty priced aggressively, right? Like, who's using Broden over Newton in a lineup, generally speaking, right? Who's using Hilaire over Cross? That one's a little bit tighter, but you get the point. Demir Blankenship. Now, this is an interesting one. He's priced pretty cheap. He's had some big games, but he's been hurt. He played last game. Let me see if I can pull that up real quick. That's not what I wanted. There we go. So he played in the last game. And let's see what he had. Oh, maybe he just got some snaps and didn't actually produce. But he is a guy, if healthy, I know he was banged up. If healthy, I really do think he's got some potential. 4 targets last game. He's averaging 6 on the season. He has games of like the early in the season 8 and 6, and then more mid of the season 12 and 7. So like it wouldn't be a surprise for Finn to throw his way. Do you think he's worth an option there? And then let's see some final guys. Cozio I talked about is a nice tight end threat for Ball State. Again, I don't want to go too crazy on them though, considering the quarterback play. Fannin, I've talked about in recent weeks, is a cheap vulture touchdown guy. Maybe that's who scores for them. Christian Sims is kind of more mid-tier for them and for Bowling Green. Let's see. Same with like CJ Lewis is another guy that's like he plays a bunch, but he doesn't really produce considering the offense. Here's Christian Sims. They threw to him a ton last game. So those are a bunch of different guys I think about. Let's take a look at real quickly here, building a lineup with all those studs I was talking about. So like right off the bat, if I go Brady Hunt and those guys, you know, I have 5,300 the rest of the way. I could go Wigless. I could go Newton, and then 4,400. I could go Blankenship. I could go, you know, Kelly, Cozio, Fannin. I mean, you get some options here. I think personally, I didn't go. I went McDonald, not a Finn. Let's throw it up there. There we go. I would probably go Stewart or Kelly here. I think this is a slate. If you're playing like 2 lineups in the big one, I would make sure to leave some money on the board for sure. So that's potentially what you could do there. If you wanted to like maybe pivot away from Wigless, you could do kind of like a Toledo stack here. Have 3,000. You could, you know, upgrade Hunt to Ja'Shawn Jackson. You could update, you know, move Kelly up to, let's see, like a Miles Cross maybe to go with ROURKE. So, you know, you have some different ways to get there. Let's really quickly take a look at FanDuel. I don't typically like FanDuel. Let's take a look real quick at their pricing here. Oh, look, they already have Wednesday up. All right, so right off the bat, Finn, and these are going to be pretty expensive, guys, but rightfully so. Paddock's price is pretty cheap, but still, he's pretty awful. So I don't know how much I'm interested in that. Kelly, I think, is that cheap route to making that lineup filled with some studs here. Problem with that is you have to choose one of the running backs or go one running back and use one, or one quarterback and use one in the super flex. But Newton's got a good price. Brady Hunt's fairly cheap. Hilaire's cheap, but this is half point PPR, so I don't know how much I'm interested in that on FanDuel. Let's see, anybody underpriced here? I think they did a pretty decent job of pricing, it looks like. So let's take a quick look if we wanted to try to fit both Rourke and Finn. 7,000 left, 5,300 left. Let's see. See, that's where it gets a little difficult if you were to do something like that. MADDOX. Yeah, and then it gets tough. I don't know how much you can do that. Projections say don't use him. Use Sia, and then I wouldn't use Wigless. Or maybe I would. I don't have enough money anyway, so it doesn't matter. Pretty tight pricing here. I'm not going to lie. Pretty tight pricing. I think I would rather STEELE than get rid of Newton. Yeah, it's just, and maybe you go like a Miles Cross. It's tight pricing here on FanDuel. Good luck. Glad I don't play it. Hope everybody had a good time. Enjoy the content here. I'm going to try to do another one tomorrow for the Wednesday stuff. Any questions or anything, hit up Campus to Canton or Realist Chris K on Twitter. More than happy to answer anything, and hope you guys enjoy the slate of games.